Welcome! So, since the announcement of a new expansion set in Cantha, I've been doing some general discussions about what we might find in that expansion. Obviously, Guild Wars 2 has a lot of its underlying systems set now. The question is just how will it tie into that remote southern continent? So, we've talked a bit about elite specializations, we've talked about mounts. Today, I want to talk in general about masteries, not including the mounts we've mentioned already in the previous video. You guys can check out on my channel that if you've missed that one. Because, yeah, masteries can be more than just mounts. If we take a look in Guild Wars 2 at the moment, you've got 3 core ones, none of them to do with mounts. The entire Heart of Thorns expansion played with different masteries and the subsequent season with the ancient magics. Then when POF came out, they went all mounts, and in that previous video, I already explained to you guys, I'm pretty sure that the next thing we see after Icebrood Saga will be a mix of some kind. Some mounts, some not mounts. Well, what might the not mount ones be? I do think that we can probably get kind of close, and so let's run through. Now, just to be honest with you guys, I've talked about this many times before. Maybe you've missed it. I'm not really a fan of the Guild Wars 2 mastery system. I don't really think it accomplishes anything much at all. It's just a basic small experience gate you deal with a bit every now and then it's random bloat and extra things that you don't really get much value out of. Sure, gliding in Heart of Thorns was really good, especially for the time. Sure, unlocking new mounts is fun, but the prize at the end was good. The actual mastery system itself, the points, the experience acquisition, I've always felt hasn't really served Guild Wars in many ways. So really, this video is talking more about what masteries will unlock, rather than whether I think the mastery system itself will really be very good. If the expansion itself actually looks at the mastery mechanics and changes them up, then, well, I'd be very happy, but I'm not holding my breath. I will say as well, for what it's worth, just before we get into the Canthan stuff, the most recent ones with the Icebrood Saga, the mastery system has been a little bit more interesting. Like, for example, right now, I only have 3 points in excess. The new patch is going to be coming out soonish, but I've got 3 points, having completed most of everything. And next time these all tier up, I'm probably going to need a ton of points, and I'll probably need a ton of experience as well. I've actually found that so far in Icebrood Saga, the mastery system is the best it's ever been. Not necessarily the prizes. I mean, the prizes, the Essence of Vigilance, the Valor, and the Resilience Manipulation, and then the Raven Achievement. These have really not been that great or that interesting. But the system itself is kind of working. So you never know. Maybe the devs will find a really good balance with this Canthan expansion, where what the masteries are unlocking is fun, and the actual meaning on how to do it is also good. I'll make this point as well, and I think I did in one of the recent videos, that with POF, they spent all their time on mounts, so we never really got to see what expansion caliber masteries that aren't mounts look like. And so, when we had Heart of Thorns, none of them were mount related. And I remember for the press during HOT, the devs were really excitable and really enthusiastic and optimistic about some wild stuff we could have been getting. Like, for example, the whole Newark lore and the Exalted lore and the Itzel lore about how we'd actually learned the language to speak to these people and unlock vendors as we went along. You remember all these ideas, guys? Do you remember the early ideas they had where certain masteries would tie into specific monsters and you could only learn to say how take out a dinosaur-type creature once you got the mastery so that you could get through its armor a bit quicker, or resistance to the chuck? One of the things that it's actually really interesting to look at with Guild Wars 2 is old content that was never implemented, and the mastery system is full of them at HOT. Well, POF, they didn't really get to re-explore those ideas, and through Icebrood Saga, obviously it's like Living World, and through Season 4 it was Living World, so they were a little bit more limited, I suppose. Now we may finally get some really cool stuff with Cantha, and that's it. That's pretty exciting to me. I will be fair, by the way. I say that they're more limited in Living World. Living World did give us the Roller Beetle, the Sky Scale, and, wait, what was this? Crystal Champion? Oh, this was the generic mount access thing. Living World did give us some pretty good stuff, particularly the Sky Scale. I think anyone can be fair and say, look, that was a hell of a mount, and that was all delivered through Living World. And the mastery side of it was pretty good too. So, yes, let's talk about it. What might Cantha give us? 2 mount slots, of which I already talked about in the other video. What else? Well, POF now looks like it's got a lot of masteries in it. But realistically speaking, I would say it had about 5. It had the 4 original mounts, and then it had the Hidden Griffin one. These others, these kind of came through Living World, right? So you kind of had 5 with POF. You kind of had 6 with Heart of Thorns. So for Cantha, I'd guess you'd probably have about 6 again. 2 dedicated to a mount of some kind, maybe 3 mounts. 3 mounts would be pushing it. I'm thinking there'll probably be an underwater one and an above ground one of some sort. And so that leaves us with about 4 slots. 3 or 4 slots. What could the devs do? Let's jump in. One big feature I think Guild Wars 2 is still missing, has been missing for a long time. People are very interested and excited in. It's kind of one of those staples for general MMOs. That's fishing. Now, I don't want to get into a massive discussion here today about all the ways you could do fishing in a really exciting and brilliant way, but I do think it's a big feature for MMOs that obviously a lot of us have missed out on. It was never in Guild Wars 1, a bit like mounts. Before Path of Fire, ArenaNet had no track record for it, and yet look at how well ArenaNet did mounts in the end. People were wondering if Guild Wars 2 should support them at all, and nowadays people think that they're probably some of the best mounts you can find in MMOs. Maybe they could do something similar with fishing, you know? How the devs can take what the industry's already doing with it, figure out exactly how people enjoy fishing features. Are they meant to be AFK mechanics? Are they meant to be social mechanics? What kind of rewards do people like to get from them? I would actually put a lot of trust and a lot of faith in ArenaNet to do it well and in a really intriguing and decent way, just because they hit the ball out of the park with such ferocity when it came to the implementation of mounts, something that we previously never really associated with the game. I think some of you guys will be listening to my voice right now and thinking, I don't care about fishing. But you never know. What ArenaNet might do is bring it into the fore a lot more and a much more enthusiastic, interesting part of the game. It would just depend on their design. How that also, by the way, ties into a mastery, again, I'm not sure. That's because I think that the mastery system itself is a bit meaningless. Maybe if fishing had its own special mastery experience that you tiered up slowly, unlocking new kinds of fish or rods and stuff, maybe it would work, but we all know that it's tied to global XP, so hey, let's not get too bogged down with that. But yeah, I think that this expansion could be very watery themed, could deal a lot with the deep sea oceans, the Jade Sea, as it now would be a sea once again, the coastal regions of Cantha, could potentially be dealing a lot with the deep sea dragon, and therefore a fishing feature, which you may consider to be overdue as like a staple of any MMO feature base Guild Wars 2 is missing, as well as all these water sides of the expansion. I think probably it would be very, very, very fitting, and there's a pretty high chance of coming. So we'll see. If they give it the mount treatment, could be pretty badass. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the Kazakhs and the Luxans, because I see the possibility for 2 different masteries at the same time. And I think that they could be along the lines of what the devs were doing with the Itzel, the Nuhawk, and the Exalted lore from way back when. So these were 3 initial ideas for masteries that were about communion and collaboration with new societies we hadn't really spoken too much before. And as I mentioned, there was this idea of maybe learning their language, getting access to new vendor wares, but also tools that allowed them to navigate their respective environments. These could have gone a lot further. They could have been a lot better. And it's been several years now. I'm sure ArenaNet's got a grasp on what worked with it and what didn't, and maybe where they fell short of their original ideas. A whole new expansion with new big masteries in it, this could be an opportunity for them. And Cantha is full of ancient and intriguing societies that these could be tied with, but I think going Luxan and Kazakh is the most natural fit. They could also add, you know, a mastery to do with learning at the Xingji Monastery and training up there in some sense, or they could add a mastery to do with just the city and maybe what has become of the Jade Brotherhood or the ministries at play there, whatever. They could do something like that. They could do all of them, but I think if they only had a couple to pick from, because of development constraints or whatever, it would make most sense to have Kazakh and Luxan. Of course, the mastery system is incapable of locking you into a particular choice. I think a lot of players would be looking for something like that. If you guys never played the original Guild Wars 1 and went to Cantha there, players basically got to pick one of these factions instead of the other, and you kind of aligned yourself with one or the other. The mastery system wouldn't allow you to say, you know, just be Itzel and not Nuhawk or vice versa. So I'm not sure how that would work, but I could definitely see learning to speak with these people, learning their ancient ways and their magics. It's kind of funny because Heart of Thorns gave us, you know, Season 3 specifically, gave us this ancient magics line. There's some interesting old lore in one of the big documents about Cantha called An Empire Divided. which maybe I'll talk to you guys about in an upcoming video, but that suggests that the Kazakhs and the Luxans came to Cantha from the south, and that they had magics that were very old and very distinct and different even from when the gods gave the magics to the free races of the world way back when. So it's an interesting idea that maybe if we had masteries associated with them, they'd be teaching us stuff. You know, maybe it would be in this mastery line that you learn to train and talk with the Kazakhs, and they eventually allow you to become a juggernaut. If you watched my mount video, you would have heard me mention that, you know, you've got this thing of, like, you could press the mount button and become a juggernaut, and then press it again and no longer be a juggernaut. Well, maybe what would be more fitting, actually, is that's a mastery, and you unlock the ability, some kind of special action pops every now and then while fighting in the Echo-Vowed Forest to become a juggernaut temporarily and blow some things up, you know? Maybe they'd have stuff to do with climbing the great immense trees there, or accessing their cathedrals and citadels. One of the things that's really exciting about the forest just in general is the idea that we'll get interiors there. Guild Wars 1 never actually let us go inside these places, but Guild Wars 2 is a much richer and more detailed game that would enable that. And then similar for the Luxans, you could have any number of things associated with their way of life and their access to the waters there. So yeah, I think that would fit. I would definitely expect maybe those two, and perhaps some kind of other mechanics. Again, if they release this expansion in time with a big Masteries update too, that would be the perfect world, but we'll see what they do. So, I did just mention the Luxans. I do have another, and the idea of the waters that they live on. I do think that we could see another Mastery that is kind of like the gliding replacement, or, you know, just the general idea of movement being unlocked. I think the Masteries kind of excel when they do that. They give you new ways to travel. And as I mentioned in the mount video, I do somewhat believe that there should be a lot of underwater stuff, and we'll probably get an underwater mount. But what would be kind of cool is, even without a mount, some kind of mastery track that allows us to do more with that 3D space that is kind of like gliding, but for underwater. So what that would mean, potentially, is being able to travel across the surface of waters. I want to say surfing here, but that's going to sound a bit silly and a bit cheesy, right? But something to do with the surface and our combat access, or actual mechanisms for swimming and different things that you can do below the surface. So, for example, pressure tolerance. Imagine maps with lots and lots of water. You're going to try and swim all the way to the bottom of the Jade Sea, this vast, deep inland, sea. Is it a lake, technically, or just a really, really big one? In any case, you try and swim down, but eventually you find the pressure's too high, you can't handle it. But never fear, there's a mastery you can train as you go through this expansion. You're going to level up, you're going to acquire some points, and then eventually you'll be able to learn to tolerate those higher pressures. Or maybe there can be slipstreams and rapids and tides that will actually push and pull and move you around, and you need some kind of mastery to be able to travel against the current, or indeed to travel maybe with the current, to be able to access a slipstream that lets you move very fast. Something that maybe allows you to jump out of the water in some kind of arc and then maybe land in places that you couldn't get before. That's something you kind of can't do in Guild Wars 2 right now, right? Like, if you're underwater and you just surface, you'll just be swimming at the surface. And the best thing you can do is get on a skimmer and then use the Bond of Faith mastery to jump. Well, what if you had some kind of mastery that allowed you to rocket towards the surface and arc out or something, you know, a bit like a whale or a dolphin or something. So, those are ideas, I think. There's loads of different things that they could do with the underwater play space. And that is one of the last places, really, in this game that the devs can offer us a lot of freedom of movement beyond anything else, and I think would be a pretty good fit for the mastery system. There's nothing stopping them as well, by the way, adding even more core to Central Tyrian Masteries. I've always thought that these were a bit limp, and I would have liked to have seen an extra one in POF. Seeing another one come out with some kind of Canthan expansion would be rather cool. But I really do want the devs to pay attention to this, because I have to say, in general, the roller beetle aside and the sky scale aside, and I appreciate those are pretty big components of Season 4, in general, aside from those two mounts, most of the season-based masteries we've got over the years haven't been that exciting and haven't been used that well. So I'd like to see what they manage to do now that most of the mounts have been implemented. They've got to start doing other things, but it is expansion time. So whether the devs will get something good, I guess time will tell. So those are my initial ideas about Masteries. As we start hearing more about this expansion, I'm sure we can talk more about it. And as I do these later discussions as well, where we start talking about specific lore, maybe we can find some other things that make sense as decent Masteries I haven't thought of just yet. And in fact, if you guys have thought of anything that would make sense as a Mastery, Let me know down in the comments. I will be reading. You guys have added a lot of value to these various discussions we've had so far this week, and I hope you continue to as we go along. So that's it, guys. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed. I'll be back for more Cantha Talk very soon, and in the meantime, feel free to check out my Arena playthrough or my Stellaris stuff. I've got hours and hours of really fun, awesome gameplay for you all. There'll be links on the end slate in just a couple of seconds. You can click them, and we can enjoy some other stuff. So thanks very much, guys. See you soon.